Welcome to episode 1383 of The Sleeper and the Bus. I am Justin Mason, joined as always on Sundays by Jason Collette. How you doing, my friend?
Exhausted, dude. It has been a great baseball weekend. We love when this time of year gets here, but at the same time, it's like, wow, can we get some sleep? I had my RotoWire OC Thursday night. We can talk about that. Friday, AL LABR. Yesterday, some involvement with the Baseball HQ online forum, first pitch forums, and online, whatever they call it. And then it's some Sirius XM stuff, and got a home draft, a home online draft tonight. Auction. So we're going to talk about that too. Lots of stuff. I know you're as busy. You have your mixed labor auction tonight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we got a ton to talk about. You had AL LABR a couple nights ago. I've got the mixed labor auction tonight. If you are hearing this podcast and it is still Sunday, if you're listening to the day it comes out, I will be live streaming. So feel free to come and watch that over on my YouTube, Justin Mason FWFB. Come hang out with me because these auctions are long and they can be a little bit boring, especially if you're by yourself. So I feel like the live streams actually really help in the auctions as opposed to probably hurt in the drafts. But yeah, I got that tonight. And we're going to talk about your AL only labor auction. So those of you who play in the mono leagues, especially AL only, will get a lot of use out of it. Everybody else will probably just enjoy, kind of the witty banter that comes with me talking with Jason. But first, we've got a fair amount of news to cover before we do that. And so I want to kind of just jump right into that. Spencer Steer may not be ready for the start of the season. He's dealing with a shoulder issue. Are you kind of taking him off your board?
I don't know if I'm taking him off my board, but I know last night looking at the labor results for NL. I want to pull that up and look at that because I was listening to Paul and Ariel and Tristan talk about that. And Spencer Steer went for $14 last night to Steve Gardner. Without that news, how did you feel that particular price was?
I think that price is fine prior to that news. I think with the news, and I assume the news came out before the draft, but I could be wrong on that. I think for me, especially in a league like an NL league, I would have just taken him off my board completely. I just feel like to me, there's just so little wiggle room on the wire to replace guys. Putting someone on your active roster that is going to start the year on the IL is pretty foolish, or not necessarily foolish, but just a mistake in general. So I don't love taking guys, and this is why I often play the middle, especially in the AL NL kind of format, is because the guys at the back end of your roster are going to actively hurt you. And so adding a guy that it's kind of the middle of your roster that probably is going to play like 120 games if you're lucky, it seems like a kind of a mistake.
I have this cringe look on my face because looking at the news, it said he was scratched from the lineup ahead of Saturday's game against the Padres due to the injured shoulder. He elected to receive a cortisone shot after examination. This will force him to pause all activities for the next few days. No telling how long it's going to be before he plays games, but he could open up on the IL because let's 3.5 weeks from now is the U.S. opening day. 3.5 weeks. So that is, I just cringed because I've been in that same situation. It's a good thing they tell you to take that time off because I tell you, when you get a cortisone shot in your shoulder, you feel great. It's like, oh, nothing hurts anymore. Then you go out, you could potentially do more damage. So, the 14 may seem a little high. Hopefully it's something you can go through, but we've talked often on this podcast what problematic shoulders do to hitting. And this could be problematic. I would not, if I was doing, I'm wondering if we could, if we were in NL LABR tonight, if he even goes a double digit, he probably goes $5 cheaper.
Yeah, my guess is he will go in the draft or in the auction tonight. It's a 12-team mixed league, but I bet you he's dollar days type of guy. Like someone, especially because LABR, you have the unlimited IL. Someone throws $1 on him and then just stashes him on their IL. So I assume he will go. I doubt he will end up on my team, though. I don't have a problem with that. Like, right, if you're throwing $1 on him at the end of the draft and you're just throwing him on an unlimited IL like that, fine. Like, I got no problem with that. But yeah, $14. That is a lot of money to spend on a guy who may not be ready until like May. So
yeah.
Next piece of news, another bad one, is Giancarlo Stanton is going to start the year on the IL with the elbow issues. There is no timetable, at least as far as I've been able to see, for his return. Are you taking Giancarlo Stanton off your board?
He went for $1 in AL labor to the team that didn't need him. Andy Andres, if we'll see later when we look at the board, Andy spends a ton of money on hitting, a ton. And he bought Giancarlo Stanton for $1 in his utility spot. So it's like, he's already going to lead the league in home runs. But the whole thing, the concerning part about Stanton is it's tennis elbows, not just one, it's both. Like, was he doing too many curls in the offseason? And so he went for $1 in an AL only. So you mix league folks, he's off your board. Maybe he's a reserve pick, and I've taken him in a reserve before we knew this was coming out. I believe I have him in WARF as a reserve. I know I have him in XFL, but that was done in November. So yeah, and I have options. I have that reserve round draft next weekend. So I'll be able to find some replacements for Stanton, but I haven't touched him since this news came out.
Yeah, and you shouldn't. I mean, there's really, outside of a format like LABR where you have unlimited IL spots, you really shouldn't. I mean, the comments that have been coming out of the Yankees front office from other Yankees players makes this sound really bad. Like, there is a high likelihood that he is not ready until after the All-Star break. You just can't roster a guy like that. I think people should be taking him completely off their board, not touching Stanton at all. $1 at the end of this auction in an AL only. I totally get it. I got no problem with Andy doing that. I mean, I have a greater issue with just the overall construct of Andy's team, but we can talk about that here a little bit.
I was just looking back at WARF. I, in fact, did not take Stanton. He went to the third team in there. I was just going to look at online championships, and I want to see where he's gone in the last, just last week. This is online championship season. So let's just look and see where things have gone here in the last week and submitting through. And we have Stanton in the last week is now 360. He's gone in one OC, and there have been 10 this week. So he's gone in one of those.
Yeah, he really should just not be being drafted in those, especially in the NFBC where you don't have IL spots. Like, just take him completely off your board. Next piece of news is, again, bad news, but not maybe as bad as the other things we're going to talk about during this news segment. Freddy Freeman is going to have a managed workload of sorts during the season because of the injured ankle. He will not play on, a day game after a night game. They're going to give him extra days off. I bumped down his projection in terms of plate appearances because of this. I mean, Freddie Freeman's one of those guys I think you could comfortably project 650 plus plate appearances every year. I don't think you can do that anymore. Does this make Freddie Freeman more of a third rounder as opposed to kind of a high tier second rounder?
So in my OC, I took him 3-3. So that would have made him the 27th overall pick. And that's where I took him. What I was looking for, I wanted to take some risk later. So I went with Freeman there for the batting average perspective. As you said, the last 4 years plate appearances, 695, 708, 730, 638. If you were to say, based off this news, a managed workload should be a Dodgers t-shirt by now. Kenny, if you're listening, make that up. Let's get managed workload and some kind of Dodgers logo, because that's like the theme of what they do. But let's be real. They're trying to get ready for October. So it's good news for the Dodgers. It's bad news for fantasy players. But I would agree with you that this takes Freeman out of the second round, and he's going to be a third round pick. And I don't feel as great about taking him 3-3 that I did 2 nights ago, but I would do it all over. If he's still sitting there in third round, I don't know how you pass on him.
Yeah, I barely have him as a top 40 hitter now. after this news. I dropped him from 680 plate appearances down to 577. He's still a very good player. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about Freddie Freeman. I don't think you're going to be able to volume the way in which he has in the past, which really kind of hurts his overall line. I still think he'll be fine. I probably have him more as a 4th, 5th rounder at this point. But I totally understand people taking him in the 3rd. I think people are going to need to continue to kind of drop him down. A guy like this who cannot value him, who's not the same hitter that he was earlier on in his career, and I know he hit literally the thing he did right after this news dropped was hit a home run. So people are like, his ankle's fine. Talking about a guy who's in his mid 30s who has got a serious ankle issues. So I think this is going to be one of those where they give him a fair amount of time off, and I may be overshooting it with 575 plate appearances. Next guy on the list is Parker Meadows has an arm and nerve issue. I don't even know what this means, to be quite honest, but it does not sound good. Parker Meadows has been one of those guys in drafts that some people are really, really excited about. I'm worried that this is going to cost him opening day, and we should be dropping his plate appearance mark quite a bit. Where are you at on Parker Meadows?
About the same as you. Any news, structural news that we're getting 3+ weeks before 3.5 weeks before the regular season, it's concerning. And with Meadows, it's concerning because remember, he's projected as a leadoff dude.
Yeah.
And so if he opens a season on the IL and doesn't have that, I don't know who else. Oh, they just put Javier Baez in leadoff spot. Why not? Right. But seriously, I mean, what else would they do? I guess Kerry Carpenter. I'm kind of staring over there going, hey, Riley Green, what this lineup isn't exactly built for that. Maybe they could do Wensiel Perez because Perez is going to open up on that probably in the opening day lineup with Matt Vierling going to miss time with it. So injuries are starting to pile up there in Detroit. And I don't know if there's a free agent option unless they walk over to Milwaukee and be like, hey, I know you just signed Mark Canha and Manny Margot on minor league deals. Can we have one of those guys, please? And I don't know if those guys have opt-out clauses for these minor league invites, but this is why some guys wait around because things like this happen in camp. And there's an opportunity. If Canha was still with the Tigers, he could take over right now and have a roster spot.
I wonder if Alex Verdugo might be an option for them. He's a guy who has led off for teams before, still doesn't have a job. So
true.
I think Wenzel Perez is probably the guy who becomes the leadoff hitter there, but this is a massive blow. Obviously, the people who've already drafted Parker Meadows, but also just the Tigers in general. This lineup becomes a lot worse without a guy on the top like Parker Meadows. So
yes,
once again, taking him pretty much off my board at this point. Except for in leagues where I've got unlimited IL spots and can get them really cheaply. So if you see me drafting him tonight for $1, that is why. It's just because I can throw him on my unlimited IL, but in virtually every other format, I would not be touching Parker Meadows. This does not sound good. So, and I just don't think we have enough information yet, actually, to make a really good conclusion. And when that's the case, I tend to stay away. Luis Gil has shoulder soreness, is going to be shut down momentarily. I'm taking him off my board. Are you?
He went $3 in AL LABR, and that's talk fine. Nobody else. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's an IL situation, so you can move that. It wasn't like it was somebody I was targeting, but he went $3, and that speaks volumes. And it was at a time when people had plenty of money, and he went $3.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the thing that we may have forgotten just as an industry and community on Luis Gil is, and I know a lot of people were down on him kind of coming into drafts, is just how injured he has been throughout the course of his career.
Right.
And he had issues last year, so I think taking him off your board and kind of just moving on from that situation. If you can get him cheaply and you have a lot of ILs, fine, but these things often end fairly poorly. So, and with Luis Gil's injury history, I can't imagine it's going to end well. So it's unfortunate, but just kind of a fact of the game, right? I mean, it's actually, I'm going to knock on wood as I say this over here. It's actually been a relatively low injury spring training so far. We haven't had anybody come in and go, oh, I need Tommy John, right? So, like, people are actually pitching. People are actually doing stuff. Again, I'm going to knock on wood because I know as soon as I draft an ace tonight, that one's going down.
For those watching a video, yeah, I'm laughing and smiling as you were talking about that because I forgot exactly who I was talking Friday. At some point, it really has been. We haven't had a lot of bad news drop. Maybe it was talking about Luis Heel, but we honestly have not had the hammer the last couple of springs. It just feels like, oh no, this guy left. Oh no, that guy left. And watch, this is that week that happens.
Yeah,
because we're getting closer to things, but we just haven't had the big drop of something happening to a pitcher yet. And it could be coming. Maybe it was because I'm still talking about my obsession of David Robertson still being a free agent and the fact that I have him in 100% of my leagues. Every league I draft, I take the guy because I figure something's going to happen somewhere for him if it doesn't go back to Texas. And yeah, I even took him an AL labor as a reserve, which means I'll have to cut him if he signs with the NL. But it was a risk I was willing to take.
Yeah. It'll all happen Monday as TGFBI drafts kick off. Like people will draft their first round and then somebody will go down. I just know that's how it's going to be. So Andrew Benintendi is out 4 to 6 weeks after being hit with a pitch. Most people weren't drafting Andrew Benintendi at least very highly. He did go Don Deandres for $4. So again, taking advantage of a guy who's going to be out for a while. Obviously, this takes him off your board too.
Yes, I mean, when he comes back, where do you put him? Because Mike Tauchman is what he is, but he can lead off against a strong side leadoff situation. I don't know why Luis Robert is still in this organization. This is the last year of guaranteed, and then the next 2 years are club options. If they're going to deal him, now's the time to deal him. I mean, you look at the fact that Kansas City did nothing. I was talking about this in Sheehan's Slack channel yesterday. They've got like Nick Prado and Carlos Martinez, usable guys that just aren't going to fit in the Royals' plans, but they need outfielders badly. And how do you not try to work something out interdivision with this? So I've still taken Robert in 2 different leagues because he's been on the periphery, just inside the top 100. And I figure something's happening. Change of scenery is going to make this a lot better. And so I've taken him. But the longer he stays on the White Sox, the less thrilled I am about having him on my team.
Yeah, this is going to be another historically bad team this year. So taking Benintendi off my list as well. With this news, you can pick him up off the waiver wire if and when he comes back from this injury. Let's move on and talk about your AL LABR team. LABR is an amazing draft experience that we didn't get to really have this year because unfortunately, due to some conflicting events, we weren't able to hold it in Florida again. And so we are all online. So why don't we start kind of just by talking about what are the massive differences between doing one of these in person and doing them online? Because I feel like it really changes the dynamic of the auction.
It does. And so a couple things just in case before we get into that particular piece, because it frames some of the other things that we do. Remember, in LABR, there's a couple of conditions unique to anything else. There are no $0 fab bids. You have $100 during the season for fab. You cannot trade fab, and whoever you draft has to stay in your active lineup unless they are demoted to the minors or they're injured. So it's either if you draft a guy and he sucks, you either write it out or you have to cut him. The 6 guys that you draft in the reserves, those guys can be moved up and down all season, but that's it. So it has a unique set of rules, and those rules are all, I believe, LABR started off as a 4x4, but then switched to a 5x5 in the second or third year, and the rules have pretty much stayed the same since. With that, maybe the innings limit came down from 1,000 to the minimum went from 1,000 to 900 where it sits now. But I just wanted to put that in context because some of the behaviors that we talk about as we get through the draft, some of that is going to be very applicable to what we have here. But online auctions, I will just say up front, not a fan of them. Had to, obviously COVID put us in that, and we did a whole bunch of them from that. But until COVID, I really cannot recall doing an online auction. I got my start, Justin, I don't know about you, but I got my start in fantasy baseball in an auction league. So it has always been my favorite. And that was 1990. My first draft was 1994. And I love the auction. I didn't have a straight draft for a home league, maybe until last year in the Hardballers League. I love auctions, but I love them in person. I do not like them online. So a couple of things I do for online auction. One, get into the software early and make sure it's set up the way you want it set up. And each one of these is different. The ESPN, I found the ESPN one because I've had to do it for football a lot, is excellent. I've never done it. I haven't done it in recent years for baseball, so I can't speak to that. Tonight I have a CBS league, and I've done the CBS league before. It's pretty good. Last night for LABR, we've had RT Sports, and it's pretty good, but none of these are perfect. That said, if you have done one, you haven't done them all. And so get it into the software and do a little bit, change some things. If you want to, like NFBC, if you want to have the sound alert you when you're on deck or when you're up and whatever, but you don't get to change the voice. The RT Sports almost sounded like a phone sex operator, going once, going twice. It was very, is different. Let's put it that way. It kind of like, I made a joke during the auction. It was kind of like that old Jake from State Farm. Who are you talking to on the phone? Well, it's Jake from State Farm. Oh, sure it is. I want to hear what it sounds like. Hi, it's Jake. That kind of situation. So get in there and play with it, and make sure your settings are where you want it to be, because they'll have RT Sports has auto bidding, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I didn't bid on that guy. Make sure your auto bidding's turned off, and make sure. I would also suggest being tethered. If you can sit close to your router at home and plug in, and being hardwired over going wireless, if that's an option for you, use it, because every now and then you have wireless hiccups. Things happen, and they're not going to roll things back like, oh, I lost my connectivity. Too bad. That's one of the things there. So rather than me monologuing here for a while, let me stop. Justin, what's something you have? And like, maybe we can go a little bit of back and forth, because I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I could go like 15 minutes.
So, in a lot of ways, when you're drafting a snake draft live versus online, it is much easier online, right? You have quiet room. You're not you're not having to like deal with a lot of the things going on. There's less distractions, and that is true for an auction as well. But auctions online move a lot faster than they do live, right? And I feel like that really changes the dynamic. You also can't get a read on people in the same way when you see someone, you outbid someone or someone outbids you. So I feel like you need to be even more prepared for an online auction because it moves so fast. And honestly, I really don't like online auctions. I do them. I'm going to be doing this one, and then I'm going to be doing two NFBC $1,600 auctions online because I can't make it to Vegas this year. But personally, I think you should do your auctions in person. I think it just makes for a better experience. So yeah, for me, it's mostly being as prepared as possible, making sure you have a really good internet connection, because the last thing you want to do is lag out on a guy. I remember during the 2020 season drafts that we did, we had to do them all online. I remember just like missing out on guys in Tout Wars because I could not, my internet would lag when it was at 2. Mm-hmm. And so I also will not wait till the last second. I think that is a massive thing that I will not do online. I'm not gonna like try to snipe a bid as it hits 2 or 1 before they say sold, because I don't want to risk my internet being slower than the machine is and missing out. So I think for me, the biggest things are like, I need to make sure I'm extremely prepared. And so like, I will come in like tonight, before I do my auction for LABR, I will come in about an hour before. I will print out paper copies of everything. I will have multiple computers set up. Part part of that is because I also stream these, but and I will be kind of ready to go long before the auction actually starts, just to make sure I'm completely prepared.
Yeah, indeed. With that, it all comes down, like you talked about your point with being able to read the room. It's such a huge part of auctions. And I always, when I talk to people, it's like, imagine what's the difference between playing poker in person versus playing online poker. And that comes, everybody has some type of tell in the room. You know, it could be me leaning back in my chair, or, you know, putting my, doing one of these with my hands. Everybody's got something. I don't care who you are. Nobody's a robot with that. But yeah, it really, that's ultimately what it comes down to. So the thing you can do is make the best of a situation with it. And so just, you know, a couple of other things for those watching on screen. I'm going to share the RT Sports auction room. For those listening, I'm going to do the best to to put this through. So with it, you know, you have some different things. There's always the chat in this. If you don't want to be bothered by everybody talking, just mute it. Just go in there and mute it. And everybody has the CBS draft rooms, have the auction rooms, but just mute that, because if you're focused on just tell me how the bids are going, then do that. So you have the ability to mute that, as well as the counting. So what I liked about RT Sports, there's a chat one and there's a bid one. So there's two separate sounds. So if you're like, I don't care what people are saying, I just want to hear what the bid count is, you could turn one off and be focused on the other. I would suggest people loading up their queue, because you're going to forget something. I mean, everybody's got something, but if you have too many inputs, you may forget something if you're trying to make a decision. But just go throw a bunch of names in the queue, especially for the end game and the reserves, so you can see where things are. You're never in that panic going, oh crap, I got 5 seconds left to nominate a guy, I'm just going to pick this guy and go.
And I'm terrible with that. Like, so like I am going to make sure that like one of the things I'm going to do the hour before is I'm just going to load up my queue with a lot of guys to make sure it's, because there's no worse feeling than like sitting there and being like, especially when you're in the dollar days portion of things.
Yes.
Like auto nominating someone that you get stuck with because you just were doing something else. Because that's, you know, going back to kind of my point on like there isn't a lot of time. Like if you're someone like me who's got auction software that I use in auction to kind of calculate what I need, to calculate what other people have, it moves so fast, it's really hard to keep up with it. So making sure you have a lot of people queued up. Now, did you guys get breaks at all, or did they just?
We got two. And that was going to be the next thing I'm going to bring is, you know, if you're planning for this, an online auction is going to take longer than the in-person auction. It just is, because you're going to, even in this, we ran into an issue where the rosters were configured incorrectly. We had to fix something. But every year, I usually plan on 5 hours for an online auction. It's just, and that's how it shakes. Meanwhile, if we're in person for Tout Wars, it is 3 hours. You know, maybe 3:15, but it's going to take longer. Even if you didn't take breaks, it's just going to take longer. So one of the things I'm this big, huge, massive pet peeve of mine: when you're nominating somebody early in the game, nominate them at a non-$1 amount. It's like you're going to go in there and put Aaron Judge at $1. Just go in and click the player. When you click the player, it does allow you to go in there, put that in. And then don't spend the whole time plus wanting the bid, because Aaron Judge is not going to go for 5. It drives me nuts. I go in there and I type a whole number. If I got Aaron Judge valued at 46, I don't want Aaron Judge, I'm typing 43 in there. And if I get him at 43, then I got him at a discount and I can make an adjustment. I did that with Garrett Cole a couple of years ago. But it's just like, go in there and push it along, because if we get to spend the whole night nominating everybody at $1 and plus wanting the thing from there, we're going to be there all damn night.
And I am the worst about this. No, so I'm the worst at this. I do this all the time. And it is largely because of what I said in terms of I'm updating my sheet and I need time. And so like, if I'm behind, you better believe I'm going to nominate the most expensive player at $1 to give myself some time to try to catch up. Because it can be an absolute nightmare. Because the problem with an auction and updating your software as opposed to a draft is a draft goes in a particular order for the most part. Obviously, people are going to reach. You're going to have to find guys. But for the most part, like it's all going, similar to ADP, so they're pretty easy to find on your sheet if you have it kind of sorted by ADP. In an auction, I mean, I can even look at my queue right now. My queue currently, if I can figure out
Spencer Schwellenbach and nobody else in it. I know.
No, like I have Brian Wu and Jazz Chisholm as like my the only two people in my queue right now. Just because I know they're guys that I can throw out that other people might get excited about that I couldn't care less about. So like I have it set up right now, like with guys that like I'm probably gonna throw out $1. I know they're gonna go for more, but they will give me time to kind of update my sheet so I can stay as up to date as possible.
So, listeners, if you have people like Justin, I mean, you could be like me. So, if he throws them out at 1, push it up to 21. Just don't hit there and just put a number. And so, when I'm in an in-person auction, I do the same thing. I don't throw anybody out $1 until it's like end game.
Yeah.
But in the early parts, I'm going to say, Jazz Chisholm, $28. I don't want to give people, or if it's a full value, sometimes, and I'm not going to say I'm going to throw a guy out at 80. Like I've seen some guidance, throw a guy out at 80% of the value and see what happens. But if you always do that, everybody knows that you're willing to pay more. So, all right, Jazz Chisholm, $32. And then you've done a freeze bid. But if you have him at 34, or if you had him exactly 32, depending on your room, you're not going to get a bargain. And on some guys, they're going to go overpriced. So if you throw the guy out at what you had him valued at, and everybody's like, oh shit, then you got him and you're fine. You move on. But you got to kind of alter your play since it is an online room. You're trying to do whatever you can with the tools that you have. And I find that nominating guys at different values closer to where they are even at full value is a good strategy play, just like it is to say, look it out there. Okay, this guy's got a lot of money. He's got this particular need because this is the next thing I want to get into in an auction. Multiple screens. It's great to be able to have that board and look over there and say, wow, he's a high money on the board and he doesn't have a third baseman. I'm throwing out this guy and seeing if I can suck Justin into spending some of that money because I need to pull him down. So it's great to have that multiple monitor so you can see who's got money left, what their needs are, and then play to that accordingly because you get into an auction at some point, there are guys that you want. And you need to get some of that money off the board so you're not, chasing. In one of my home league, it's funny because we have a guy that is completely unpredictable on how he spends money. But I'm not going to out him as far as last name on here. But some people in my leagues listen to this show. They're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But you never know what player this guy's on. But when he's on it, that's it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, no, I'm not getting this guy. Once he starts bidding, he rarely drops out. And so it's like, all right, next. But you just got to get him to spend some of that money, understanding that eventually he's going to say no, but rarely he does. But you got to get some of that money off the table so then you can execute the rest of your plan.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I really love having 3 screens, like, right. So like I have, and I will have during the auction, like, 3 different computers running at the same time. So one computer will be for like just my streaming stuff. Like, right. I'm going to be, it'll be just streaming the auction, streaming the draft. And then I will have one for actually drafting and then another one for my draft software. So that to me, like, is like, so that way I can go back and forth and I'll probably have a 4th screen just running a draft board for myself. So having that kind of stuff, and I know obviously not everybody can afford to have that kind of setup, or may not want it, but it makes it so much easier to kind of segment it off and have different devices running different things at the same time. So that way you're not having to go back and forth because there's nothing worse. I think it was my first online auction, and it might have been the Tout Wars one, where I had just everything on one computer. I was, kind of running that. And then all of a sudden I accidentally hit the X button trying to go between tabs and I closed out the draft room. And I'm having to reload it. And I know I missed players that I wanted. Thankfully, the one player I really wanted that I missed out on was Joe Adele, who just ended up being terrible. So, but you just got to be really, really kind of, like I said, organized, set up with something with a kind of a system that is going to work for you.
Yeah. And there are other ways. If you don't have, at my desk here, I've got 2 monitors, plus I've got my MacBook in the middle, right? If you don't have that, there are other ways. Get an HDMI cable and go plug it into your one of your televisions. Yep. Go to the local thrift store and find a $10, $20 an HDMI, and all of a sudden you have a second monitor. There are ways around that. One year I forget one year I was in New York City, and I think I was in Boston, and I did LABR from my hotel room on an ironing board as my desk, and I had the HDMI cable into my hotel room TV, so I had 2 monitors. And I've had to do this before. So, but yeah, I can't recommend that enough. Having the multiple monitors and making sure that your draft room is on the screen all by itself. That way you don't run into that issue that you just outlined.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into your auction specifically. This is a really, really sharp room with a lot of really smart people, some of which we've had on the show. Like I believe we've had James Anderson and Ian Kahn and obviously you, but there's also Larry Schechter, who's won a lot of industry leagues. You mentioned Adi Andres, Jesse Roach of Baseball Perspective, Tristan Cockcroft, one of my favorite dudes from ESPN, Colton the Wolf. Man, like those guys are absolute monsters in these industry leagues. Chris Towers, another great dude. Dave Adler, another great dude. So Steve Gardner, obviously, who runs LABR. Did you come in with a set strategy? Because I'm typically, when it's an auction, I have a general idea of how I like to build a team, but I kind of let the auction come to me. So I don't really have a quote unquote set strategy when I enter an auction. It's mostly about kind of pivoting off of what other people are doing. What did you think kind of sitting in this room?
So coming into the room, the plan I had down, and a lot of this, by the way, the Leviathan, the USA Today's Fantasy Special, will have this for everybody. Like Justin's got to do the same thing after tonight. Steve sends us a one-page doc to answer some questions that gets put into the March 12th. So if you want to see what everybody has to say about what they were thinking about in draft, please go out and buy that. So my thought coming into this is I had a couple of things to do. One, I wanted to stay out of tier 1 starting pitching and tier 1 closers because I didn't want to pay the premium for those. Maybe it's because of all the time that we spend talking together on here and in our group chat with Eno and Paul. It's like I feel way too comfortable about pitching to be like, oh, I need to go chase this. So I was like, I'm out. And then even the work that Chris Towers did, his great article that's been mentioned a bunch of times, where it's okay, yeah, if you want the premium, go get it early in rounds 1, 2, and 3. But the guys between 4 and 10, you don't differentiate much. And so I was like, I'm going to build, and I've had success previously building from this because I won this league 2 years ago. And last year I was winning it until the final 4 weeks when James took me over. Thank you very little, Taj Bradley and Cutter Crawford. But I digress. So I've done well with the strategy in this league. With 1 year, the year I won, I put a premium on pitching because I felt that the offense was, with the stolen bases becoming new, that we're going to see higher ratios and whatnot, and that worked out well for me. And so this year it was a little bit of a combination where I wanted to avoid the premium on thing while not completely punting pitching, but I wanted to emphasize power on offense because last year that was another area that I had some issues in. And the teams that I struggled in last year, with it being a down offensive year, I did not have enough juice on my team to cover that. And so power was a point of emphasis with that. But one thing I will say is that if you've been in a league with me for a long time, I rarely walk out of that auction with one of the highest paid players in the auction. But I told myself if Aaron Judge or Bobby Witt Jr. came at a price that I liked, that I would not hesitate to buy that. Because normally it's just me pushing that up, and I'm like, all right, never mind, I'm out. It's usually Andy buying it or Rick and Glenn buying that, one of those guys. And in this case, neither of those guys. Chris ended up with Aaron Judge, and I kind of chuckled because he didn't want Aaron Judge. I believe it was something like he made a misclick or he had clicked a +1, but he ended up with Aaron Judge. But there was a comment in the chat. He goes, I actually didn't want him, but oh well. But with me, I was pushing. I had Bobby Witt valued at $46, and like what I said early, you're not getting bargains early. In a room like this, there are no bargains early. So if you got a guy at 46, you have the opportunity to get him at 46, you go get him at 46. And that's how I happened to end up with Bobby Witt Jr. But that's, if I were to hide the names and say, all right, pick Collette's team, I don't think you may have said, okay, well, Caminero, McClanahan, me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be him.
Yeah,
but to say, Collette bought one of the tied for the highest guy. No, that's not what Jason does.
Yeah, and I mean that's typically I don't get the highest guy because usually in drafts like these, especially industry drafts, but I mean I think generally speaking in auction drafts, there's always one or two people who want the most expensive players. They're going to do stars and scrubs. They're going to, and so they will overpay for those guys. Like I know specifically in Tout Wars, it is very, very rare to see me walk out with a $40 player. Just because now it's happened last year in both Tout and Labor where I got Acuna in both those leagues, which worked out perfectly for me. But also a reason why I don't go after these guys, because when you spend $50+ on someone, that is 1/5 of your budget. And all it takes is an injury like we saw to Acuna last year that you're starting at a massive deficit.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons why I tend to not draft those guys in auctions as opposed to in a regular draft. I love your team though. I mean, I'm gonna nitpick certain things, but overall,
that's not a problem.
Yeah, overall, I really do like your team. It's a really good mix of some safety and some fun. You got Bobby Witt Jr. at 46. Your next most expensive player, though, is my boy Royce Lewis at $19.
Oh, Junior Caminero at 23.
And Junior Caminero at 23. I love the Lewis one. I'm a little scared of the Caminero one, but I totally understand it. Were these two guys that you were coming in going, hey, these are guys I know I'm probably going to end up with?
No. So when I looked at it, once I did the Lewis thing, once I did the Witt Jr. thing, I was like, okay, that happened. So let me see. I'm just going to continue to try to find guys at a good price where I am. I honestly thought Caminero was my next purchase. Caminero was somebody that I thought would go to 25. He was not somebody I wasn't going in. I don't go in targeting big name. I'm looking at profiles. We've talked about it so much on here. There's so many guys that look like the example I hammered home last year was Randy Arozarena versus Adolis Garcia. They were essentially the same guy. So if like you miss one, go for the other one. And they were the same guy. And it turned out that, they both stunk last year for the most part, but they were still the same guy on paper. And so when Caminero was at 22, I had him as a $24 guy, and this was kind of early. So I was, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and say 23. If somebody says 24, I'm walking away. I don't need this. But I still only had one guy on my roster. Now, Royce Lewis, I will say, you've said it when you and Paul were talking about like his per plate appearance production is just outrageously good, but he is the Byron Buxton of third baseman. And that's, last year it was perfect. Homered in his first at bat, hurt his knee in the second one. And these things happens. But in my head, I was hearing what you were saying. I was hearing what other people, and it got to the point again, I think Royce Lewis, eventually these guys have that season. They can do it all. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to bid. Somebody says 20, I'm out. It wasn't like the whole, let's just say a 9 and push it. I was comfortable putting that number out, knowing that if I ended up with them, I'm fine. If I didn't, then oh well, I would have bowed out. But in both those, Caminero was more, it was pushing it. Royce Lewis was somebody, if you would have told me coming into the draft, I was actually more interested in having Royce Lewis on my roster than I was Caminero.
Yeah. I mean, I love Royce Lewis. I think this format makes him even more risky, obviously, because there's just so little to replace him. But I think it's such a good price that I don't have a problem with it at all. Other guys on your offense that I really like, Shea Langoliers is at $16. I think often people are like, oh, I don't want to spend money on catchers, but the bottom end of catchers, especially in an AL only league, actively hurt you. And for instance, I'm going to point out, Chris Towers has Kyle Teal and Christian Vasquez. Teal, we have no idea when he's going to be up. Vasquez is one of those guys that probably will return negative value. Corey Lee on Larry Schechter's roster, probably going to return negative value. Even Bo Naylor on James Anderson's, he will give you a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, but ultimately, like, he is probably a negative value player, and he got him at $9. So getting a guy like Langoliers, who I have a lot of hope for this year, and I really think is going to be a really good value, was a great way to start off your catching pool.
So I will say this, heading into this, I like budgeting by position. So in the catching position, I had $20 budgeted for catcher. Now in that $20, it was, I want a primary guy and I want a non-dollar catcher type of situation. At the top of that list was Langoliers and Ryan Jeffers. That was at the top of that list. However, if Salvador Perez came at a below 18, because I didn't want a dollar catcher. So Salvador Perez would have come in at 18 or lower. I would have gone that direction, but that's what I was looking at. Derek Carty gave a great presentation at the HQ online forum yesterday, talking about how Sutter could really play up well for power. Langoliers was already hitting bombs at Oakland, and it could be even better for him with that. So that was the intent there, was to spend some money. As you said, the catching pool is problematic in AL. And when I look at, Yainer Diaz at 27 to me is like mind blowing. And I love Yainer Diaz, but that was Andy, and Andy throws his money around on offense. But Cal Raleigh at 19, Salvador Perez at 19, and Adley Rutschman at 19. So I got the fifth catcher by money spent. But honestly, it was the one guy. He was option A for me, and Ryan Jeffers was option B.
Yeah, I think those are really, really good options. Garver, I really like as a $3 gamble. I think he's one of those guys, if he's healthy, he should be able to return that value easily. Mountcastle at 13, totally fine. Zach Geloff at 17, kind of stacking those A's a little bit.
Yeah.
I do worry about him from just a straight skills perspective, but I think he's going to play every day and kind of accumulate. You just got to kind of worry about the batting average elsewhere, which I think you did a decent job with.
That was thanks. That and the steals. So when I looked at that, I'm trying to remember exactly where I'm looking at the other second baseman and shortstops that were. I don't have the exact draft order in there, but like Jacob Wilson went for $10, and Jacob Wilson is somebody that I had interest in. And I still tried to get him later, and I couldn't afford him at that point. But Ha-Seong Kim was still on the board, but I didn't want to wait until May for that to come true. And maybe Jeremy Pena was still there, but I feel really good about the price. Again, I wanted to get a taste of the A's in Sacramento and enjoying the offensive environment. And then Geloff runs too. Yeah, no, he strikes out, but he's not the only strikeout guy I have. When you're in an auction, you're paying money for certain things. Nobody's team is perfect coming out of this, and batting average is absolutely going to be a challenge for my roster. But I'd rather be trying to find average than trying to chase power, because trying to chase home runs and RBIs. I mean, Andy's team, if for those who are just listening to this, you can go and check Andy Andres has got a ton of offense, and he had a ton of offense last year, and he dominated most of those categories anyhow. So it's like you're not trying to play for first in a lot of these categories. You're trying to distance yourself from the rest of the pack because you can't catch him when he's spending $195 to $200. And I think in his case, he spent I think he spent $225 on offense or something close to that with that. So you're just not catching that. So why bother? Why try? You're just trying to distance yourself from the rest of the pack there. So I was willing to take shots on batting average because I felt like I was accumulating enough run production. Again, if everybody stays healthy, accumulating. But that was one of the reasons why I spent the money on Soler that I did, spending $13, because I've talked about on this. I love the situation that Soler is going to be in with the Angels. He's going to hit second in that lineup. He's going to have a lot of plate appearances. He's going to DH. So he can just go out there and try to do Marcell Ozuna light. And Marcell Ozuna is not coming at $13. He's coming at $26 in NL, and I could get Soler at half that price. And so he was something I was specifically targeting for this particular build, knowing that the money invested in Witt Jr. was going to cost me somewhere. And it obviously cost me in the outfield.
Yeah, the outfield is where you have some real problems. I love Soler. The Wenzel Perez, especially with the news that Meadows is going to be out for likely a little while. Like, I actually really like that vibe.
Yeah, and Beerling. So I was hoping to get him at 2. That's an example of one. I think that was the bid where it kind of said going twice and it kind of sat there. And then it was like going 1 and then it jumped to 3. I was like, well, son of a bitch. I went 4, but that was one of the ones where I thought I had him at $2. And I was like, yes, this is great. No, I spent $2 extra bucks.
Yeah, but the rest of the outfield, Jake Myers is fine, especially in AL only. But Alan Roden and Richie Paleos, like as everyday players in your outfield, that is a little bit scary. I do like the Dylan Moore pickup, even though I'm not a big Dylan Moore fan in general. But his positional eligibility in a league this deep, it could be really, really valuable.
So to give some backstory on a couple of those, because there was some intent there. Now, these weren't folks that I was targeting by any means, but again, when you come to your profile, you're looking at Endgame, there are certain things you're looking for. I did try to buy. I mentioned this to Tristan, and I put this in my USA Today post draft interview. He got Joe Adele and Dalton Varsho at $11 and $10, and I was the penultimate bid on both those guys, but could not go higher when they came up. I would have loved either one of those. Tristan got both of them. Again, once that happened, I was like, all right, what else can I find here? So with Myers, one of the things that intrigued me about Myers in the late game is he was one of the best outfielders last year in defensive runs saved. So that defense is going to keep him on the field and give him more opportunities for playing time. And playing time is what it's all about in an AL only or an NL only league. So that's why I took a chance with him, and we'll see where that goes. Alan Roden, Blue Jays are going to suck. I don't. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Go look at his numbers in the minor leagues. It's funny, he played for the Creighton Blue Jays, and now he's a Toronto Blue Jay. But go look at his numbers in the minor league. On-base machine. Reminds me of Spencer Horowitz when Horowitz came up last year, and he had that same on-base chops in the minors. But Rodon's an outfielder, and look at that Toronto outfield situation. There should be an opportunity for Alan Rodon to make this club at some point. Now, I'm not expecting out of camp, but he is having a really good camp. Jeff Zimmerman mentioned him in Mining the News recently and said GM really, really likes what he sees here. With Palacios, it comes down to him being second base plus outfield in an only league like this, especially one with roster, the way you can move your roster in labor. It's critical to have a couple of guys that you can move around. And so he was one of the reasons. And we mentioned how the park going to Steinbrenner should help him in particular. And there was that article at Baseball Prospectus at the start of January that cited him as one of the guys that should benefit. And finally, with Dylan Moore, it was funny. RT Sports didn't know how to handle him because Dylan Moore qualifies at 4 spots, and RT Sports only recognized 3. And so when I drafted him, it came in the middle infield, and they kept saying on the live stream, Collette has no outfielder. So I'm like, no, I have one. I just can't put him there. So when I drafted Geloff, it moved more to utility because it didn't know how to recognize 4 positions in the system. So that's why Moore shows up at utility, because the system just didn't know what to do. But the thing that really intrigued me with Moore, besides the fact that he went to UCF, is he already had 30 steals last year. But one of the things in the presentation I gave at HQ yesterday was the impact of managers on stolen bases. And once Dan Wilson took over the Mariners were running. Scott Service and the Mariners did not run much. Under Dan Wilson, they ran a lot. They weren't at David Bell, Dave Martinez level, but the Mariners over the final 5 to 6 weeks of the season were in the top 5 for stolen base attempts as a team. And that's what intrigues me about Dylan Moore repeating 30-plus steals despite his flaws. I know he strikes out a lot. I know he has trouble with righties, but it's not like they're swimming in options to replace him. And if they run and he likes to run, just put him in the 9th spot, let him run.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's going to steal a crap ton of bases. He's not very good against right-handed pitching, which I think could hurt your batting average, but he's going to play. I think he's just going to play every day, and they're just going to deal with him at the bottom end of that lineup. But the stolen bases are going to be plenty, and having that positional eligibility in a league this deep, I think is just so valuable that I am totally fine with getting a guy like Dylan Moore for $9. Let's talk about the pitching, because I generally like a lot of the pitchers that you drafted. I don't know that I love the totality of it. You have in your rotation, you've got Joe Ryan, Shane McClanahan, Carlos Rodon, Spencer Arrighetti, David Festa, Charlie Morton. This feels like a lot of injury risk. McClanahan coming off a TJ, Carlos Rodon is Carlos Rodon. Joe Ryan struggled with injuries last year. I don't know if David Festa is actually going to be in the rotation to start the season. Are you worried about the level of risk you might have put into this rotation?
Yeah, that's why they came at the prices they did. I mean, yeah. That's why. So the one that concerns me the most is Carlos Rodon, and the only reason I'm concerned is because if you look for those watching on video, you say Kikuchi went $10, and he went $10 like 2 picks later.
Oh.
But in an auction, you don't know what's going to happen. And if I would have passed on, if I would have let Rodon go at 12, and then because Rodon. Nick had a really nice write-up at Pitcher List the other day talking about how Rodon's working on is showing extra vertical on his fastball, some really good things. You like the run support that he should be able to get from the Yankees lineup. It's not going to be as crazy as it was last year. But in a vacuum, I like Kikuchi better than Rodon this year because I really like what Kikuchi did once he got to the Astros. But I didn't know that Kikuchi would only go $10, and I tried to go 11. And I was like, because I was in my head, he got to 10 going once, and I was like, I can make this work. I can make this work. And by the time I got over to click, the site had moved on. So that was another example of in a room, I could have got that in, but the site, for some reason, it wasn't consistent. And that's one I would have said 11. Now, Chris may have just gone to 12, but I was trying to make that one work to go on there. I was like, well, I'll just take both of them. And you have to be willing to do that in an auction. So that's where that came up. David Festa, I agree. It's like Simeon Woods Richardson. I don't know why people are all bought into that. Chris Paddock with the contract. They may force Festa back to St. Paul. I hope not. Festa's working on a sinker this year. Really showed some good things last year. And as I've mentioned previously on this show, as excited as you were about Bailey Ober when he had his breakout year, I feel Festa is there on that precipice as well.
I did too.
And he was absolutely a target. He was somebody at the end I really, really wanted. And then Noah Cameron, same thing. I've mentioned Kansas City had an unprecedented level of pitching health last year. Like all their stars, they were able to get everything from everybody. You just don't see a lot of that this day and age. Noah Cameron is next man up in there. He's on the 40 man. I got a couple of texts from people listening to Nick and Paul talk the other day, and over the past week. It's like Nick keeps talking about your boy Noah Cameron, because I had Noah Cameron back in the Bold Prediction Series, and I was thrilled to get him at the end. Well, because I had $1 outfield and $1 pitcher left, and that was Alan Roden and Noah Cameron. That's how I filled those last 2 spots. So I expect big things from Cameron. In the reserves, I picked up Louis Varland. So if Varland's going to make that Twins club as a reliever, so if Festa goes down, I got somebody to put in there. I got Yainer Cano only because I got right there in that middle of the reserve. I was looking at guys like Nick Kurtz and James Anderson took Nick Kurtz. There was like 3 picks in a row. Like I was ready to go. And the 3 of the 4 picks before my spot of picking Cano were the 3 guys that got taken. And I forgot the other 2 that were there, but I wanted to get I wanted to get 3 pitchers and 3 hitters in reserve. I had the second pick of the reserves, and I took David Robertson because I continue to hold out hope that he's going to sign with the AL. In my home league, I traded a 3rd round pick in the reserves to get David Robertson from somebody in hopes that he signs as a closer. And I've taken him in every draft that I've done so far. And I took him here, and that would make me feel a lot better about the Kenley Jansen, Liam Hendricks situation that I ended up with for a total of $21 for saves. Because again, I didn't want to punt saves. I just wanted to compete in saves, and Kenley Jansen should get the saves he wants in pursuit of his milestone goals, unless something gives out on him.
Yeah. No, I think the save situation, obviously Hendricks, if he becomes the closer, I think you're in a really, really good spot. Because now, do you guys lose? Let's say someone gets traded to the National League. Do you lose that player, or do you guys get to keep him? Okay, so
we only lose the player, like in David Robertson's case, if he signs with so we can't. David Robertson wasn't eligible for the auction piece, but in the reserves, anybody is eligible. But if they sign with a National League club, you have to
Then
cover.
you would lose it. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, because my only concern would be is if Kenley got traded midseason because the Angels aren't going to be very good. But if you get to keep the stats, even if he's traded to the National League, I can't imagine he's going to be traded to a situation where he's probably not a closer. I love I kind of love your closing situation there. Hopefully Hendricks is the guy. I think there is a little bit of risk that they go with a guy like Chapman, but I honestly think that is a situation that may change hands a few times. But if Hendricks looks as good as he has in the past, then that may be a coup at the price that you got Hendricks, which was $8. All right, and then in your reserves, you got Miguel Andujar, you got Yennier Cano, Chase Madrath, Dave Robertson, as you mentioned, Louis Varland, and Shea Whitcomb. Anything you want to talk about in terms of those guys?
So I was trying to, obviously I knew my outfield situation was garbage. So I needed to make sure that I could find, and the fact that I wanted to get David Robertson as my first pick meant I had to punt outfielder. So Andujar was the second guy that I took in the reserves just to find something, because I doubt Rodon's going to make the opening day roster where everybody else is going to. So I wanted to make sure that I had an option that I could put in my lineup and move that around. And if I'm going to take an option, take the guy in Oakland who may enjoy some offense with that. And with Whitcomb, the numbers last year, the numbers in the minors have been great. The opportunity hasn't been there, but we'll see what Houston does, or maybe that's somebody they trade. Like Loperfido was putting up great numbers and they traded him to Toronto. So Whitcomb was somebody that I was looking at for that purpose. And with my draft, that's another guy that I've continued to pick up in a lot of my drafts because it's Chicago. It's an open audition. The playing time should be there. He should be able to qualify at both middle infield positions, if not even corner. We'll see what they do with him, but I expect him to get a lot of playing time somewhere as the season moves on, because he was part of the big return for Garrett Crochet, and they're going to want to put him on the field. So I'll take my chances with those skills and see what he can do with batting average and maybe speed, and not much else. But again, playing time, when in doubt, look for players with good skills on bad teams, because they're going to eventually get that opportunity.
Yeah, I like your team overall. I think it's very strong, and you're going to have a good shot to kind of redeem your falling short last year. That is going to wrap us up for this episode. Jason, want to remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug any work you got going on.
Yeah, so at Blue Sky, Jason Collette, I'm going to write up. If you want to read the write up on the labor, that'll be at Collette Calls at RotoWire this week with things, and then I'm going to be on the RotoWire Fantasy Podcast this coming Friday with Clay Link, so I'll be doing that one and getting ready for Tout, man. Potapalooza next weekend, so I'm gonna, once you show the schedule, I'm in one of the Potapalooza sessions with some buddies next Sunday.
You are leading off Sunday.
Ooh, I get to hit lead off.
So, and it's going to be a very, very fun it's going to be a very, very fun group, because it is you, me, and Nick Pollock talking starting pitching. So
that's amazing.
You, me, and Nick are going to be talking starting pitching Sunday morning. Now, the schedule is subject to change because I'm behind on everything this year. I was behind on setting up Potapalooza, so I'm having people. I've kind of set a preliminary schedule, and hopefully over the next day or two, I will have a concrete schedule. But currently, right now, it's going to be you, me, and Nick leading off on Sunday, talking starting pitching, which should just be a ton of fun.
That's amazing. That'll be a fun panel. Although I don't have like a Framber versus Reagan's thing with Nick this year. I don't have.
I'm sure we'll find something. Yeah,
but we can talk about how much we both love Noah Cameron. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Oh, we should actually make sure we put that on the rundown for sure.
Lead off Noah Cameron. Everybody else, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. You can find me on all social media platforms, Justin Mason FWFB. Like I said, I'm going to be streaming my tout or my labor auction this evening. It is 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. You can catch that on my YouTube. You can also catch Potapalooza, like Jason mentioned, all next weekend on my YouTube, which is Justin Mason FWFB. We're going to be raising money for Fantasy Cares. We're going to be talking a lot of Fantasy baseball, we're going to be giving away raffle prizes, some really, really cool ones. And yeah, it's going to be an absolute blast. You can catch my written work on Fangraphs and Fantasy Pros as well. That will wrap us up for this episode. For Jason and myself, thank you for listening. Have fantastic baseball spring training.
See ya.